The mall was supposed to be closed hours ago. Rain pressed against the glass doors in steady waves, blurring the neon sign that read Clearwater Galleria. Inside, only the cleaning crew remained, except for a police K-9 unit responding to a routine call about a triggered motion sensor in the West Wing restroom. When Officer Grant and his German Shepherd, Shadow, stepped in, the smell hit first, metallic, sharp, wrong. The dog stopped by the last stall, stiffened, and refused to move. No command worked. And when they finally opened that door, the night changed forever. If you're drawn to stories that leave questions burning long after they end, stay with us. This one deserves to be heard. The rain hadn't stopped since dusk, and Clearwater Mall sat under it like a forgotten monument. Glass street, lights half dead, parking lot puddled with reflections of old lampposts flickering against the wind. Officer Ethan Grant watched the weather blur his windshield, wipers squealing tiredly. He took another sip of coffee gone cold and glanced at the clock, glowing dimly on the dash. 11:42 p.m. Dispatch crackled through the radio. Unit 7 motion sensor triggered in Sector C, West Restroom, lower level. No janitorial staff logged there. You're the closest. Grant sighed through his nose, reached for his flashlight, and clicked the mic. Copy that. On my way. In the back seat, Shadow stirred, the black and tan shepherd raising his head, one ear twitching. The dog's amber eyes caught the glow from the dashboard like molten glass. He didn't bark. He just watched, waiting. Yeah. Grant muttered, starting the engine. One last false alarm before we call a night, huh? The drive around the building was silent, except for the rhythmic thump of rain. Grant had worked K-9 patrols for 9 years. He trusted Shadow more than anyone on the force, and in some ways more than anyone in his own life. The dog had pulled him out of a burning van once, dragged him by his uniform collar through broken glass. Since then, Grant rarely went anywhere without him. Inside the mall, security lights glowed a pale amber, giving the long corridors a hollowed-out look. He parked by the side entrance, used his key card, and the heavy door clicked open with a metallic echo that traveled down the hall. Stay close, he told Shadow quietly. The dog padded ahead, nails clicking faintly on the tile floor. The Clearwater Galleria had been built in the early 2000s, when the town was supposed to become something, a destination, a growing hub. But factories shut down, jobs vanished, and people moved away. The mall became a shell of what it used to be. 3 out of 10 stores still open, food court mostly shuttered, fountains dry. Grant's flashlight beam cut across the empty hallway, glinting off vending machines and scattered flyers that curled with damp. Somewhere deeper, a pipe clanged, that lonely metallic groan that always made abandoned spaces sound alive. He followed the signage towards Sector C. Shadow kept his nose low, occasionally glancing back as if to make sure Grant was still there. Probably a raccoon, Grant muttered, or some punk kid hiding from the rain. But Shadow's pace slowed as they neared the restroom corridor. His muscles tightened beneath his dark coat, a low rumble forming in his throat. Grant's steps hesitated. Easy, boy. The door to the men's restroom was half closed. A soft flicker of light came from inside, one of the fluorescent bulbs dying a slow death, buzzing faintly. The smell hit next. Not the usual cleaner and tile polish. This was iron and something sour underneath. Grant's pulse ticked faster. He unclipped his holster, stepped closer, and nudged the door open. The hinges moaned. Inside, his flashlight swept over a row of sinks, one dripping steadily, water pooling beneath it. Paper towels littered the counter like snow. Shadow moved ahead, sniffing, every muscle taut. His tail was stiff, ears locked forward. Clear, Grant whispered as he scanned the stalls one by one. Empty, empty, empty. Then they reached the last stall. The door was closed, but a faint trail of water. No, not water. Seeped from underneath. Shadow froze. He sat down, right there, muscles rigid, eyes locked on the crack beneath the door. Shadow. The dog didn't move. He didn't growl, just refused to go closer. His breathing quickened, not from fear, but focus, as if he recognized a scent Grant couldn't understand. Move back, Grant whispered, more to himself than to the dog. He reached out, nudged the stall door gently. It didn't budge. Locked. He swallowed, tightened his grip on the flashlight, and used his boot to push harder. The latch cracked. The door swung open, and what he saw made his breath stop. A man sat slumped against the toilet, head tilted forward, eyes open but glassy. Dried blood painted his shirt and pooled in the corner beneath him. His right hand clutched something, a phone. Screen cracked, faintly blinking with a low battery warning. Grant's stomach dropped. Jesus. He stepped back. The metallic scent bloomed heavier, thicker, like rust and rot. Shadow whined softly, refusing to move an inch closer. Dispatch. This is Unit 7, Grant said into his radio, trying to keep his voice steady. I've got a 10 to 54 at Clearwater Mall, Sector C restroom. Male, mid-30s, possible self-inflicted, but he stopped because the more he looked, the less it seemed like a suicide. There was no weapon, no sign of one, and the blood pattern, the spray on the sidewall, the angle of the pooling, it didn't fit. Grant took a step back. And that's where he noticed a second phone, half buried under the man's leg, an older model, screen dark, casing cracked and smeared with blood. He pulled on gloves, lifted it carefully, and felt something strange, a chill crawling up his arm. The phone was still warm. Someone had been here recently. By the time backup arrived, the rain had turned into a mist that clung to the windows like breath. The mall's night guard, Tom Riley, stood pale-faced near the entrance, muttering that he'd seen nothing, heard nothing. Grant watched the crime scene techs move in. Cameras flashing, latex gloves rustling, plastic evidence bags snapping open. The body was bagged and tagged, carried out on a stretcher, but Shadow still sat by the restroom door, eyes fixed inside, unblinking. "He's not like that usually, huh?" said Detective Marla Hayes, pulling her coat tighter. Grant shook his head. "He's trained for cadaver searches. He doesn't freeze like this. He moves, he tracks. But this..." Marla crouched next to the dog, watching his ears twitch. "Maybe it's the smell." Grant didn't answer. His gut told him it wasn't. He looked around the restroom again. Something about the stillness felt wrong. Not just death wrong, arranged wrong. The mirrors weren't fogged despite the humidity. The trash bins were empty. Even the paper towels scattered near the sink looked too deliberate, like someone had thrown them there to make it look natural. "What's your read?" Marla asked. Grant hesitated. "It's staged, but not by someone sloppy. Whoever did this wanted us to think suicide at first glance. But they missed something." He pointed to the stall door's bottom edge. Blood spatter ends right before it. Means the door was closed after the injury. Marla's brow furrowed. "So someone shut it." Grant nodded. "And locked it from inside, maybe with string or wire, then pulled it out after. No fingerprints. I bet forensics won't find any on the handle." Marla stood. "You think it's connected to the break-ins last month?" "Could be," Grant said, glancing at the corpse being loaded into the van. "But Shadow doesn't lock up over break-ins." The dog finally stood, pacing once in a slow circle, nose to the tile. Then, without warning, he started barking, low, sharp, insistent, toward a vent grate near the floor behind the last stall. Grant moved quickly, crouched, and shone his light inside. Dust. Lint. Then something metallic glinted. He unscrewed the panel carefully, pulled it loose. Inside the narrow vent, wrapped in a torn grocery bag, was a small bundle. He unfolded the bag and found a stack of old photos. Each one was slightly faded, printed on matte paper. All were children, 5, maybe 6 years old, posing in school clothes, smiling awkwardly at a camera. And behind every photo, written in red ink, was a date. Marla leaned in, squinting. "Those dates! They're all from last year." Grant flipped the last one. The ink was fresher. The date was today's. And beneath it, a name, Sophie Grant. The world tilted. He froze, staring at the letters, his daughter's name, written in shaky handwriting that made his pulse thunder. Marla, "What?" "That's my kid." They sealed the scene, took photos, bagged evidence, cleared out. But the drive home felt like a tunnel of noise. Rain against the windshield, static on the radio. his thoughts looping. When Grant parked in front of his house, small 2-story, peeling white paint, he just sat there for a long time, staring through the glass. The porch light was on. Inside, a shadow moved, his ex-wife Claire, probably putting Sophie to bed. He didn't go in right away. He just sat, hand on the steering wheel, the other gently resting on Shadow's head. "What the hell's happening, boy?" he whispered. The dog didn't answer, but his eyes, dark and steady, never left the house. Later that night, Grant sat in his small kitchen, staring at the photo again. The writing was smudged but unmistakable. Sophie's name, today's date. He tried to tell himself it was coincidence. Someone with the same name, maybe, but deep down he knew better. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have opened that stall." Grant's breath hitched. He looked at Shadow, whose ears lifted sharply. The screen flickered again. Now it's your turn to see what he saw. The message disappeared, just vanished in the screen, leaving only his own reflection in the dark glass. Tired eyes, the faint tremor of fear starting to crawl through his ribs. And outside, through the curtain, he saw it, a dark figure standing under the streetlight across the road, motionless, watching the house. The streetlight buzzed faintly, flickering like it couldn't decide whether to stay alive or die out. The figure standing under didn't move, didn't shift, didn't speak. Just watched. Grant's hand hovered over the curtain, heart hammering in his chest. Rain still whispered against the window, thin as mist now, turning the light into halos. He reached for his radio before realizing he'd left it in the car. Swearing softly, he went for his sidearm instead. "Stay," he told Shadow, though the dog was already by the door, hackles raised, eyes locked outside. He flicked the porch light on. The figure didn't flinch. Grant opened the door slowly, stepping out onto the porch, gun low but ready. "Police!" he called out, his voice echoing down the empty street. "Show me your hands." Nothing. The figure, tall, hooded, maybe male, tilted its head just slightly. Then, like a whisper in reverse, it backed away into the fog until the light swallowed it whole. Grant jogged forward, eyes scanning. Nothing but silence, wet pavement, and the fading thump of his pulse. When he turned back toward the house, Shadow was standing at the doorway, tail stiff, gaze sharp as a blade. "Inside," Grant said, breath shaking. He locked every door, checked the windows twice, then 3 times. When he finally sat on the couch, it wasn't comfort. It was exhaustion with teeth. He laid the photo on the coffee table. Sophie's name stared back. The red ink looked darker under lamplight, more like blood than marker. His mind spun. How did someone know her name? He hadn't been married to Claire for 2 years now. He only saw Sophie twice a week and never shared that information outside official custody records. Was this a threat? A coincidence? Or something else? Something worse? He rubbed his temples. The phone he'd found in the stall still sat in an evidence bag on his counter. He shouldn't have taken it home. He knew that, but something about it felt unfinished. He plugged it into his laptop, ignoring every part of him screaming that this was a bad idea. The screen came to life. Cracked glass, faint glow. A single notification blinked. One new voicemail. Grant hesitated. Click play. Static. Then a faint voice. "Male." Breathing shallowly. He knows. It's not over. If you find this, tell. A loud thud. The sound of water dripping. A scrape like metal on tile. He's still here. Then silence. Grant's heart slammed. He replayed it. Same thing. The last words echoed in his skull. He's still here. The next morning, the town woke to rain that refused to stop. Gray clouds sagged low over Clearwater, like they were ready to touch the rooftops. Grant hadn't slept. He drove to the precinct early, the smell of burnt coffee clinging to him. Detective Marla Hayes was already there, hunched over a stack of reports. "You look like hell," she said, not looking up. "Didn't sleep?" "Join the club." He sat down across from her, dropped the evidence bag on her desk. "The second phone from last night. I went through it." Her eyes flicked up. "You what?" "I know. I shouldn't have. But there was a voicemail. The victim knew he was being watched. And there's something else. He hesitated. The vent. Those photos. Marla's expression darkened. Yeah, forensics is running them now. We found partials on the edges, not the victims. Someone else handled them recently. Could be connected to the missing kids cases from last year. Grant froze. Missing kids. She nodded grimly. You remember the reports for disappearances all under the age of 10. We never got solid leads. The last one went cold in December. Grant felt his stomach twist. You think the guy in the restroom was involved? Maybe. Or maybe he found something he wasn't supposed to. The question is, who wanted him silenced? Grant leaned back, staring at the wall, his thoughts racing. Sophie's name. He wanted to tell her, but didn't. Couldn't. Not yet. Instead, he asked quietly, You said there were fingerprints? One partial match in the system. Marla said. Name came up as Evan Cole. Former mall maintenance. Quit 2 months ago. Grant frowned. Cole, that name sounds familiar. He's got priors, trespassing, illegal surveillance. Never violent. But get this, he was the one who installed the new motion sensors last year, including the one that triggered your call. Grant's pulse quickened. Where is he now? Marla checked her notes. Address listed as out by Lake Marin. Cabin number 12. Grant stood immediately. I'll go. Grant, wait. You're too close to this. I can see it all over your face. I'll take Shadow. I just want to talk. Marla sighed. You don't just talk. You get answers or bodies. Sometimes both, he said, already heading for the door. The drive to Lake Marin took an hour, winding through pine forests and back roads slick with mud. The rain had thinned to drizzle, mist curling off the ground. The lake was half shrouded in fog, water black and still. Cabin 12 sat near the edge, wood darkened by years of damp, porch sagging, windows taped with plastic. Grant parked a few yards away. Shadow jumped out first, nose to the air, tail low. Let's see who's home, Grant murmured. The first knock went unanswered. The second made the door creak, open slightly, not unlocked, but unlatched. Shadow growled softly. Grant pushed it open, gun drawn. Evan Cole? Clearwater PD. The smell hit again, not as strong as last night, but familiar. Iron, dust, and rot. The cabin was a mess. Tools everywhere. Piles of old electrical wires, half-burnt circuit boards, and open boxes of motion sensors. And photos, pinned across one wall, hundreds of them, were printed surveillance stills from mall security cameras. Hallways, storefronts, bathrooms. Grant's stomach turned. Every picture had time stamps, some circled, some marked with red X's. He moved closer. One photo near the center caught his eye, a blurred figure entering the west restroom at 10:58 p.m. The victim. Below it, another frame. Grant himself, walking in minutes later. And below that one more, his house. Zoomed in through the living room window. Grant's throat tightened. Footsteps creaked on the back porch. He spun, gun raised. Police? Show yourself. A figure stepped into view. Not Evan Cole. Younger. Early 30s. Hooded. The same build as the one he'd seen under the streetlight. Drop it, Grant barked. The man smiled faintly. You shouldn't have come here. Where's Cole? Gone. Like the others. What others? The man tilted his head, eyes glinting in the dim light. You really don't know, do you? Grant stepped closer. Start talking. He worked for us. Then he got scared. Tried to warn people. But you found him first. Grant's pulse pounded. Warn them about what? The man's voice lowered to a whisper. About what's underneath. Before Grant could react, the man darted out the back door. Shadow, get him. The dog shot forward, powerful and silent, leaping through the doorway into the rain. Grant followed, boots slamming on wet planks. Through the fog, he caught flashes, the hooded man running toward the woods, Shadow closing fast. Then a gunshot. The sound cracked across the lake, echoing. Grant's heart dropped. He sprinted, flashlight cutting through the mist. He found Shadow near a fallen tree, barking frantically, but the man was gone, vanished into the forest. Only footprints remained, leading down toward the shoreline before disappearing into water. Grant dropped to one knee, checked Shadow. The doll was fine, shaken, ears back, trembling. On the ground nearby was something small and metallic. A key, stamped with the word, Service. By the time he returned to the precinct, Marla was waiting with a file open. You found something? Grant nodded, tossing the key onto her desk. Found a room full of surveillance photos. Somebody's been watching them all, and me, the guy I chased, mentioned something underneath. What's under Clearwater Mall? Marla frowned. Just maintenance tunnels. Maybe an old storm shelter from construction days. Why? Grant's jaw tightened. Because if that's where this leads, I'm going down there. Marla looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, You're getting in deep, Grant, if this connects to your daughter. He cut her off. Then I don't have a choice. That night, Grant sat alone again, the storm easing into a slow drizzle. Sophie's photo still lay on the table, edges curling slightly. He picked it up, turned it over. There was writing on the back he hadn't noticed before, faint, almost invisible unless you held it under light. The door under fountain. He stared at the words, pulse spiking. The old Clearwater Mall fountain had been dry for years, sealed off, boarded up. Shadow, lying at his feet, lifted his head as if he understood. Grant grabbed his coat. Come on, boy. They broke in through the maintenance door after midnight. The mall was darker than before, completely silent except for the hum of old lights. The fountain sat in the central atrium, covered by plywood and caution tape. Grant pried it open carefully. Beneath the boards, the concrete basin had a metal hatch at its center, covered in grime. The service key fit perfectly. He turned it. The lock clicked. When he pulled the hatch open, a rush of cold air breathed out, damp, stale, and carrying that same metallic scent that had followed him since the first night. Shadow growled softly. Grant shone his light down the ladder that disappeared into darkness. Rusted rungs, wet stone walls. He took a breath. Stay close. As they descended, the noise of the world above faded, replaced by dripping water and the distant hum of unseen machinery. At the bottom was a narrow corridor, lined with pipes and old maintenance doors. One door stood open, flickering light spilling out. Grant raised his gun, stepped inside, and froze. The room was filled with dozens of security monitors, all showing live feeds of the mall. Some from above, some from angles that shouldn't exist, vents, ceilings, even inside closed stores. In the middle of it all sat a single chair, and on the chair, facing the screens, was Evan Cole, eyes open, throat slit, hands tied to the armrests. On one of the monitors, a camera feed blinked between static and clarity, showing Grant himself, standing in that very room, flashlight raised, and from behind him in the reflection of one monitor, something moved. For a single breathless moment, Grant didn't move. The humming machines filled the narrow space, steady and low, like a heart that wasn't his. On the monitors, his flashlight beam quivered, and behind him, in that grainy reflection, a shape moved between the pipes. Show yourself. Grant barked, spinning around. The beam caught only steel and dripping water. No sound, no breath. Just the echo of his own voice sliding along concrete. Shadow growled, a low sound that trembled in the air like a warning. His gaze stayed fixed on the corner, a patch of darkness too thick, too still. Grant stepped closer, gun drawn, heartbeat hammering his ears. Come out. Slowly. Something shifted. A faint scuff of a boot against stone. Then a voice, calm, too calm. You shouldn't have come here, officer. It was the same man from the cabin. Same tone. Same quiet confidence. He stepped forward slowly, hands raised, under the flicker of light. His face came into view, gaunt pale, eyes hollow with sleeplessness. Where's your daughter tonight? He asked softly. Grant's stomach nodded. Don't say her name. The man smiled faintly, like a priest who already knew the confession. It's not her we want. It's what she saw. Grant froze. What are you talking about? Kids see things adults ignore. Your daughter was in that mall 3 weeks ago. She saw us bring him down here. She saw Cole. Grant's vision swam. That's not possible. She was at home that night. Check her drawings. The man's voice was steady, almost kind. She draws what she dreams. And what she dreams are memories. The words hit like a fist. Grant's hand trembled slightly on the trigger. Why? He demanded. Why the photos? The phones? The names? Because they don't just disappear. None of them. We send them. Send them where? The man tilted his head again. That same eerie animal motion. Underneath. To the ones who built this place. Grant's mind flashed back to the Foundation records he'd skimmed years ago. Rumors about old mine tunnels buried under Clearwater, sealed off after cave-ins. He dismissed them as small-town legends. Until now. Shadow's growl deepened. His ears twitched, and suddenly he barked, sharp, desperate, spinning toward the back of the room. Grant followed his gaze. A heavy steel door stood there, slightly ajar. Beyond it, stairs leading further down. He turned back, but the man was gone. Just gone. Grant moved quickly, Shadow at his heel. The air grew colder the deeper they went. The stairs opened into a cavern lined with crumbling brick and pipes that pulsed faintly, like veins. The smell hit him again, stronger, sour, and metallic. And then he saw the cages. Dozens of them. Old, rusted, but not empty. Inside, tattered toys, small shoes, children's drawings nailed to the walls. Grant's knees nearly buckled. He gripped the bars, flashlight trembling in his hand. Oh, my God! Shadow whimpered, pressing against his leg. In the farthest cage, a figure stirred, barely visible in the dark. A man, shackled, thin, face gaunt with dehydration. Grant rushed forward, gun lowering. Evan Cole. The man lifted his head weakly, eyes bloodshot, lips cracked. You shouldn't have come. Grant blinked. You're alive? Cole coughed, blood trickling down his chin. They made another. Copy upstairs. Watching you. Grant felt cold crawl down his spine. Copy. Cole nodded weakly toward the ceiling. Everything down here built to replicate. They test people. Memory, behavior. Cameras aren't for security, they're for learning. What are they learning? Cole smiled faintly, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. How to be us. Then his gaze fixed past Grant's shoulder, and terror bloomed in his expression. Run. Grant turned. Standing in the doorway was himself. Same uniform. Same flashlight. Same gun. But the eyes were wrong. Colorless. Still. Too calm. Shadow's growl turned into a snarl, the fur along his spine bristling. Grant froze, disbelief flooding every thought. The reflection, the movement on the monitor, it hadn't been someone hiding. It had been this. Who are you? Grant demanded, voice cracking with fury. The copy tilted its head, same as the man before. You opened the door. You let begin again. It raised its gun. Grant dove aside. The shot rang out, ripping through the air and smashing against the pipe. Steam burst, filling the corridor with white haze. Shadow lunged, knocking the copy backward. The two struggled, metal clanging, claws scraping. Grant fired once, twice. Sparks flew, but the thing didn't bleed. Instead, it moved like a recording, every motion too precise, too clean. Grant grabbed a wrench from the floor, swung hard. It connected with a sickening crunch. The copy fell, twitching, face glitching between expressions that weren't human. For a second, its voice broke apart, fragments of static and memory. She sees what we hide. Then its eyes went dark. Grant stood there, chest heaving, wrench trembling in his grip. Steam hissed around him. He turned to Cole, but the man was gone. Only the sound of dripping water remained. By the time Grant climbed back up to the mall, dawn had started to pale the sky. The rain had finally stopped. He sealed the hatch behind him, his hands shaking. Shadow pressed against his knee, silent, watchful. Grant looked around the empty atrium, quiet, almost peaceful now. But the feeling of being watched didn't leave. He sat on the edge of the boarded fountain, phone in hand, and finally called Marla. "It's done," he said quietly. "You okay?" He didn't answer right away. His voice came out hoarse. Tell forensics to shut down the mall. Every camera, every feed. And burn what's underneath. What's underneath? Grant looked at Shadow, who watched him with steady, tired eyes. Something that knows how to look back. He hung up. Later that evening, at home, he found Sophie at the kitchen table. She was drawing as always, crayons scattered everywhere. She looked up, smiled softly. "Daddy, I drew you." He smiled, weary. "Yeah? Let's see." She turned the page toward him. The drawing showed him in shadow standing by a big fountain. Above them, in a gray shadow, was another version of him. Same face, same uniform. Staring down. His chest tightened. "When did you draw this, sweetheart?" She shrugged. "Last night. I saw you down there. But it wasn't you." He swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. "You didn't go near the mall, did you?" She shook her head. "No. I saw it in my dreams." Grant forced a smile, gently ruffling her hair. "Dreams can't hurt you, okay?" But she looked at him for a long moment, too serious for her age, and said quietly, "They can if the dream's awake." That night, when Sophie was asleep, Grant sat alone on the porch, cigarette burning down to his fingers. The world was silent, except for the whisper of the river in the distance. Shadow lay beside him, head resting on his paws. The dog hadn't barked since they left the tunnels, just watched, as if he could still hear what Grant couldn't. Grant's phone buzzed once. No caller ID. A text appeared. "She's next." Grant's breath caught. He stood instantly, but before he could call back, the message deleted itself. Then, from inside the house, a faint noise, the static hum of the baby monitor. He froze. He hadn't used that monitor in months. It clicked again, soft but clear. Then a voice, his voice, came through the speaker. "Sophie, time to go." Shadow bolted upright, barking. Grant ran inside. The living room lights flickered. The monitor on the table was still glowing faintly. The house was empty except for him and the dog. Yet through the static, the voice continued. "She's waiting where the mirrors meet." The sound cut out. Grant stared at the reflection in the window, his own face, pale and shaking. And for the briefest second, his reflection smiled back before the light died. Epilogue. Clearwater Mall was demolished 6 months later. The official report listed structural instability as a reason, but locals still talk about the night the demolition crew quit halfway through. After one worker swore he heard children laughing under the rubble. Officer Ethan Grant transferred out of state soon after. He keeps to himself now, small town by the coast. Doesn't talk about the mall. Doesn't talk about the night he went below. But every once in a while, neighbors say they see him sitting outside with his old K9, Shadow, both of them staring at the sea. And when the wind shifts, carrying the faint hum of power lines, you could swear you hear another voice, one that sounds almost like his own, whispering just behind him.